News. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary, and that's not news. That's just my opinion. And then what we do is we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. Welcome to the broadcast. Good to have you here. And you'll note we had just a little bit of a delay. Well, why did we have just a little bit of a delay? Well, because from time to time, as you know, we interact with a lot of different websites. And one of the websites that we interact with is YouTube. And YouTube last week suspended this broadcast, and we really didn't know why. What they said is they said that our report ran afoul of both U.S. and World Health Organization experts when it came to COVID-19 vaccinations. And I couldn't figure out what went wrong because I went back through. They gave me a tape to look at, which was the entire broadcast. And so I went back through my logs and I came up with when we were talking about COVID, and I couldn't find anything that I said wrong. Then I was watching Fox News, or maybe it was a website. I don't know. Anyway, I was watching another website, and on that was James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, who read that Project Veritas had been suspended from YouTube using the exact language and the exact length of time of suspension that has been currently imposed on the Wells Report. And what ended up happening is that I then had fresh information to go back and reappeal the YouTube suspension, because it wasn't the report that I made. It was the report that Project Veritas made. And whether YouTube likes it or not, that is a news story. It is a national news story. Not what was actually in the video, which, by the way, was a Pfizer executive talking about how Pfizer was using COVID-19 to maximize profits. It was explosive. And I pointed out my reservations regarding hidden camera interviews, especially after I only played part of the tape. I didn't play the whole thing. I only played part of it. But that was enough to get the Wells Report suspended by YouTube. Now, the circumstance goes from there to where we are now. I reappealed their decision because now I knew why it was that the Wells Report got suspended. And I said the following. The Wells Report is a news broadcast. Like it or not, indeed, the Project Veritas video was a news story nationally, covered on most platforms around the United States, including this one. It wasn't that I was, say, for example, endorsing the report. In fact, both at the beginning of the report and at the end of the report, I disclaimed it. I have real problems with hidden camera interviews, especially after I saw this one. It took place in a bar. We have no idea what the circumstances setting up that hidden camera interview was. And I pointed that out at the beginning. And then I also pointed out, the pitfalls of hidden camera interviews in the first place. Are they ethical? There are arguments on both sides. Then at the end of it, I ask a couple of other questions. Okay, who paid for the alcohol? And what was this guy expecting during that interview or during that conversation? Now, as far as I know, and perhaps you can point out something that maybe I miss, okay? Yes, there is no live chat on the YouTube channel. YouTube has completely suspended the Wells Report. I can't even reach you on the YouTube channel. Meanwhile, they haven't taken down anything from the Wells Report on YouTube, and I think that's dishonest. Now, I'm not egging them on to take down the Wells Report, but they should put something above my channel saying that for reasons of violations of community standards, The Wells report will not be seen until, and then give the date that my suspense is over. But they want their cake and eat it too. There are people that come and look for the Wells report, and what they're doing is they're getting about to the middle of last week. And that is, like I said, that's a little hypocritical. But let's move on. It is my contention that the Wells report presented the Project Veritas video of the Pfizer executive not as a way of misinforming you, because I warned that I wasn't really happy with this entire idea, but it was a news story. I had vetted it from different news sources. CNN ran the video, Fox News ran the video, a lot of other people ran the video. The Wells report ran the video as well. And I have to be perfectly honest with you, Project Veritas may have indeed run afoul of their community standards. This broadcast, as a news broadcast, a news program, reported the story as a news article, not as any way of advocacy or anything else. So I wasn't doing anything except reporting the news. So I resent the appeal, and we'll see. Chances are pretty likely the appeal will take as long as the original suspension, so I'm not expecting that they're going to reverse themselves. But I did want to bring that up to date. I wanted to bring that up to date so that you had some idea of just exactly why it was the Wells report was suspended. All right? Because it wasn't, and I have to protect the reputation of this show. I'm proud of it. We have not reported stories that were reported by major news agencies that ended up in courtrooms with those major news agencies paying out money to the people they besmirched. There have been pieces of news that I voted no on because I could not vet them, that were vetted by both CNN and Fox and a whole bunch of other big guns, NBC News, MSNBC, that we did not report because we got it right and they got it wrong. This broadcast is not about misinformation. And I disclaimed the Project Veritas video on both sides. Looking at the chat room, Chris Grimes, a friend of the broadcast watching on Facebook, Project Veritas has a long history of shady and unethical behavior. You did express your misgivings about the interview. I did. Chris is correct. Simple case of this is Project Veritas is using a not used much news device. The idea of a hidden camera interview. 60 Minutes has done it. There have been a lot of these over the years, right? But Project Veritas uses this, and in some cases, they are right on the button. In some cases, they are not. And what I will do and continue to do is I will bring the actual rules and ethics of journalism into this broadcast. This may be a silly little news show, but it's a damn good silly little news show. And we have actual, honest to goodness, time-tested professional editorial policies on this show. And to have YouTube think that for whatever reason that we were misinforming the public means that they didn't watch the whole thing. They didn't actually watch it. I'm on firm ground here. Because we do things right. We just do. And I just want to make that abundantly clear. Okay? This is a small audience. But that doesn't make any difference. You deserve the news. And you deserve the news told truthfully and fairly. And you can't find it anywhere else, which is why you spend time with us. And you know for a fact that I'm going to report this news, and I don't care whose political ox gets gored. I'm frustrated with both political parties. I do not advocate for one over the other or the other over the one. I just don't do it. As a matter of fact, and I've talked about this over and over and over again too. I hate reporting politics. But what we have here is we have politics leading this nation around by the nose, and it's frustrating beyond measure. I mean, we have to be able to have a government that doesn't require constant news reporting. That constant news reporting to protect us from the government. And by the way, Gallup polling is out with yet another poll on what Americans think is the biggest threat to the United States. I bet you can guess what it is. I mean, we have to have a government that, one, you don't have to lord over from a press standpoint to be able to inform the public that it's a threat. The other one is you can't have a government that's out to destroy this nation. That's not a government. That's an enemy. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that when you tune in to this broadcast, you get real news. And I'll do that until they take it away from me. This is the Wells Report. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can join us and debate on this broadcast. You can do it on the chat room. You can call me on the telephone. The chat room is available at Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. And also you can find us on the telephone. I know, ancient technology. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. It's right there. It's right there on the little chat room thing. It's right there. Okay? Call me on the phone. You have no idea how much easier it is for me to talk to you on the phone than it is for me to read from the chat room. I don't have any problem doing both, but come on. Help a brother out. Let's see what's going on. Chris, by the way, thanks for your comment regarding Project Veritas. You and I feel the same way. Getting thunder and sleet in Parker County. A thunder sleet. My goodness. And let's see what else going on. There is no live chat on the YouTube channel. Kelly Lyons says hello from the frigid north. She lives in Oklahoma with us. All right. Welcome to the broadcast, Kelly, and your friends at ODOT. Thanks very much for watching this show. So we've been talking a little bit about why the Wells Report was suspended by YouTube last week. And it was because we ran some Project Veritas video that YouTube had a real problem with. And the thing about that is that as I played part of it on this broadcast, it was not nearly the whole thing. I just wanted you to understand that it was there because I was reporting it as a news story. Project Veritas was reporting it as gospel. And I was reporting Project Veritas's reporting, which was a national news story. And YouTube just threw us all in the same basket of deplorables and suspended all of us for a week. That was what I was trying to find out last week. I filed another appeal this morning for them to reconsider based on my disclaimers before and after. Speaking of people having trouble with their newscasts and whether or not they're going to continue to be suspended by the people of the United States this time, CNN is in the midst of paying for Jeff Zucker's horrifyingly partisan propagandizing of CNN. Chris Licht is now running the place. It's been rocky. Warner Brothers Discovery bought the network last year. David Zaslav picked Chris Licht to figure out what to do with CNN. CNN has cut personnel. They are cost-cutting across the company because they've been destroyed from a standpoint of on-air product. Licht has been deliberate in his programming moves. He launched CNN This Morning with Don Lemon, Poppy Harlow, and Caitlin Collins, which is starting slowly in the ratings but growing since it began simulcasting on HLN. I've done morning shows like that, and you start out with nearly nothing. We're doing it right now here on the Wells Report. And you start out with nearly nothing, and you have to build it. And oh, by the way, Don Lemon is getting one hell of a favor from Chris Licht because Don Lemon was at the forefront of the propagandist efforts of CNN before the big change, before Jeff Zucker was invited to leave. Now, Don Lemon, and I pointed it out on this broadcast, has gotten off on the right foot on this morning show. He's actually done some good journalistic work on that morning show. Now, I'm not a big fan of Don Lemon, but I am a big fan of real television and real news reporting. And if Don Lemon wants to start that, well, then he can reclaim the trust lost by CNN along with his network. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. He's trying to figure out what to do in prime time. The network never replaced Chris Cuomo because he was another guy on the leading edge of propaganda. It's likely a comedian will be part of the equation. Fox News is doing, in case you don't know, Fox News is doing Gutfeld, and that's the number one late night television show in the United States. Why is that? Well, that's because of The Tonight Show, ABC, Jimmy Kimmel, all those guys are blowing it. Well, okay. So this is the Wells Report. We're going to get to the news coming up in just a little bit. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report, news, analysis, commentary, and debate. Thanks very much for joining us today. There is a chat room. Please use it. Some people have been interacting with our last segment. Kelly Lyons points out that she loves the Gutfeld show, and there's a very nice vibe on that show. It's a little too loosey-goosey, and the reason is because there's an idea that goes to radio programming that says that what you try to do is you try to put people together that have some chemistry. And what you do is you bandy about stuff and hope brilliance ensues. And you can do that. And you do that by show structure. And they haven't quite found it yet at Gutfeld, but they're getting there. And what needs to happen is that I would dare say that somebody with a lot of morning radio experience would help that show immensely, insofar as, there are ways to be able to sharpen it up. But the idea that Gutfeld is the number one late night show in the United States right now is a testament to how bad the Tonight Show is and the Late Show and all those other broadcasts on the major networks. You simply cannot be a political propaganda source and succeed. That's what we've learned from CNN. Chris Grimes says this: I find it humorous that CNN got criticized for having too many partisan presenters, which they did, when all of Fox News is propaganda. Not true. Not true. I know these things because I spend an awful lot of time looking at it. Is Fox News biased? Yes. Fox News is biased. But the Jeff Zucker CNN was pure propaganda. It's not what you report, it's what you leave out that turns a news broadcast into a propaganda broadcast. CNN turned itself into the state media. He goes on to say that Fox has zero journalistic integrity. Now, there are some shows that are just hopelessly partisan, okay? Sean Hannity, for example, Hannity on that broadcast, all that is a stenography service for the Republican National Committee. It's one of the chief problems with the show. And it's one of the problems that I have with Sean Hannity in general. He is, for all intents and purposes, a Republican flack. Now, if it works, it works. He's still on the air, and I'm doing this. Okay, but from a standpoint of other news, like, for example, Tucker Carlson is turning into a first-rate investigative reporter. Is he partisan? Yes. Is that good? No. Laura Ingraham has also turned the corner away from just embarrassing Republican propaganda. But they never went down the road that Jeff Zucker took CNN down. Okay, but I can understand, like, I pointed out bias on Fox News, and I said that as soon as they started hiring, when they hired Sarah Palin, for example, I came on this broadcast and said, okay, with the hiring of Sarah Palin, Fox News has turned itself into a biased news source. It's not so much that even CNN or MSNBC, which is hopeless and unwatchable, it's not so much that they are valueless. The facts that they do report are worthy of consideration. It's the other garbage surrounding all of it. See the difference in the Wells Report. When I opine, you know it. I have strict rules governing the difference between news and my opinion. And they don't do that on these other broadcasts, which is why they're going down the tubes. And they should. They should. Let's see. Chris Grimes says, Gutfeld's show is great if you want to give your neurons an hour's rest, which is the point. That is exactly what late night television ought to be. Late night television ought to, if you're going to touch on politics, have fun with it. Have fun with it. Have fun with it from different points of view. Okay, that's fine. All right, that's not a problem. Man, I think about what Saturday Night Live could be doing with Joe Biden if they would just have fun with him. if they just have fun with him, if they get rid of all of these sour leftist guys that absolutely insist that everything has to be right down the propagandist line, we're turning ourselves into a humorless society where the lowest common denominator of someone's overly sensitive, oversensitive feelings is dictating how we communicate with each other. It's crap. It's absolute crap. Leather up, Cupcake, have some fun. Stop being such a jerk about stuff like this. Your feelings are not more important than reality, okay? And that's just the way it is. Let's see what else. Chris, CNN is in trouble because their reports were untrue. Well, I don't know that their reports were untrue, but they certainly propagandized enough so that their stories were incomplete, because that's the nature of propaganda. And remember, they were propagandizing. That was propagandized. It was propagandizement of political policy. It was awful. Let's see. Ginny says, I've been watching the news, too many lies, no truth, so I try to listen to JD. Well, keep doing it, by all means. The only thing that saves Hannity is the people who actually report on the show. Hannity is a waste. That comes from Ann Hoy Guzman, who is a conservative. Make no mistake. And I'll say it right here, right now, on this 30th day of January, year of our Lord 2023, the Hannity show's in trouble. They are. And they're going to have problems. Chris says, getting your news from television, except for PBS, is like getting your nutrition advice from food marketers. That is a perfect analogy. That absolutely is. Although I will point out, PBS NewsHour took a whole bunch of these leftist news journalists and essentially gave them a different opportunity to propagandize leftism. Okay, and that's not coming from me. A lot of people have said that. Hey, has anybody heard from Kathleen Branson? She used to be here every day. I hope my show's not in trouble. Oh, wait, it is. People need to learn how to laugh again. It's absolutely true. Conservatives are just as guilty as liberals, says Jessica, and she is right. Replying to Chris, says Ann, where does PBS get paid and their news? Well, PBS gets their news from everybody else, and PBS also gets paid by us, we, the people of the United States. If there is going to be a straight down the line center broadcast, it has to be the PBS NewsHour. When it was the MacNeil-Lehrer Report, that was exactly what that show was. That was required watching for this broadcaster. I watched the MacNeil-Lehrer Report every chance I got because it was just that good. And this nation is not being served well by the supposed free press. And it's bought and paid for. And it's got to stop. It absolutely does. As a matter of fact, that's why I still do this show. Because somebody's got to tell you the truth. And if nobody else is going to do it, by God, I will. That's just the way that is. Let's see, what else? Bill O'Reilly seems to be objective, but he admits to Biden derangement syndrome, says Buddy McBride. Well, you get what you give. You get back, you reap what you sow. Plant corn, get corn. That's what my mom used to say. PBS lost my support when the LGBTQ plus agenda came to Sesame Street and Blue's Clues. Absolutely. Absolutely. You simply, look, can you minimize a small minority in this society? The answer is no. Can you allow that small minority to take fascist action against anybody who points out the fact that, what we're really talking about is what happens behind closed doors among consenting adults? It's none of our business. And it's sure as hell none of our children's business. Just wait until they're 18. Tell them whatever you want to. Oh, wait, she says Blue's Clues is actually Nickelodeon. Chris points out that most of the PBS NewsHour in-depth stories have nothing to do with politics. Very informative. True. The best thing these days is each segment posted separately on YouTube, and one can watch the whole show or just a story that interests you. That is exactly right, and we are trying to do that on this broadcast. And as soon as I can work this thing through, and I'm getting better at it, by the way, you'll note that we had a promo on the other day. We're going to take each of these hours and we're going to separate them. We're going to do separate descriptions so people can watch what they want to watch. Because the Wells Report right now is a 2-hour and 56-minute broadcast, and it's too long. And I can't stop reporting the news. I mean, we've been toying with the idea of taking the Wells Report down to 2 hours. And I told my executive producer, Dirk Steele, I said, Dirk, what do we leave out? And he said, yeah, I get it. Exactly. Jenny says, that's why I watch the show. I watch the Wells Report. You give the truth. If you get upset with what you're saying, get over it. Truth is truth. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's absolutely right. One of the most important things on this broadcast is the fact that I have people who have a different political point of view appearing on this broadcast and contributing to it. That contribution is essential to this broadcast. Just because I say it doesn't mean that it's some gospel. What I'm saying is okay, here's my take on the news. That's what my opinion is. But I tell you it's my opinion. And you have to know that that's okay. And you have to know that that's the right thing. Okay? Let's see. The LGBTQ plus members who I don't see as groomers are the ones who speak out against LGBTQ plus groomers, members who think drag shows aren't adult-only shows. They are adult-only shows. Why in heaven's name would you want to confuse kids going through puberty? They're confused enough. Golly, let's give our children a break. Good heavens. Let's see. Judy Woodruff just retired over 5 decades of journalism. Pretty remarkable longevity. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I will, however, point out that my radio career is going to celebrate its 50th anniversary next month. Yeah, it's not just the LGBTQ plus community members, it's the allies too. Well, the LGBTQ plus community recruits people who will provide them with support. And that's okay. I don't have any problem with that either. I just want people to understand a blowout party in Barstow. No. Chris, are you from Barstow? I mean, is that where I know you? Blowout party in Barstow? No. I live in Texas now. I wouldn't get within, let's see how many, 1,500 miles of California. Not right now. I mean, California is beautiful. If you walk through the Yosemite Valley and don't cry, it's because for some reason your senses have been turned off. I mean, that place is gorgeous, but it's run by people who think it's a political toy, and it's not. We have at least an entire generation who's addicted to pleasure, and motivation centers of their brains have been atrophied. Well, I got to be perfectly honest with you. I used to watch Saturday morning cartoons, which, by the way, don't exist anymore. What happened to Saturday morning cartoons? God, that was fun. My brain was pretty badly atrophied because of those Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, let's just put it out there. Really? I used to watch the Banana Splits. I'm sorry. I just thought of something that they did, which I thought was really funny. Look, look, what we've done here is we've allowed the wrong people to dictate terms in this country. This is not about politics. Politics cannot rule the day in a free society. I dare say that politics is about manipulating free society to a political end. And enough is enough. It's time to stop it. It's time to stop it. There are Saturday evening cartoons. They're not the ones we used to watch. Well, Adult Swim is funny. I think the humor is too forced, and I think it's too conceptual, and I think that people are trying to be too cool for the room. All right? I mean, all that. Kelly Lyons, Deputy Dog, Quick Draw McGraw, Woody Woodpecker, Top Cat. She says those are the best cartoons. Well, I used to watch Adult Swim too, says Yvonne. Yeah, what happened to it? Oh, it just became too cool for the room. Really? Yeah. Yeah, it just became too cool for the room. And that happens too. What happens is you get a nice audience, and then what you do is you just keep talking to that audience, and it narrows over time because you don't keep inviting other people in there. You just don't keep inviting other people in. And so that's what happens to a lot of shows, right? That's why I tie this broadcast to something that I don't have control over. I don't have control over what the day's news is. This is the Wells Report. Stick around. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. You stay right where you are. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks for joining us today. I referenced something in the last hour that I want to give you some more detail on. Gallup News is out with one of those surveys that you have to know about. And the headline is More Americans cite our government as the top U.S. problem. Inflation ranks second. This is Gallup poll. You can go to Gallup.com. It's actually news.gallup.com. More Americans name the government as the nation's top problem in the very latest Gallup poll, which encompassed the rocky start of the 118th Congress. With high prices persisting, inflation remains the second most cited problem. And amid elevated tensions about the southern border, illegal immigration edged up 3 percentage points. Mentions of the economy in general fell 6 points to 10%. That's the lowest reading in a year. And by the way, I didn't have a chance to spend a little bit of time on this. There was good economic news over the weekend. Inflation month to month in, I believe it was December, was 5%. Still too much, but now we're inside the envelope of what wages had risen to in order to react to inflation. There is other economic news that is not so good. This is not John David saying, well, there's good news, but remember, it takes about 18 months for this giant aircraft carrier of an economy to turn. Well, look at all the layoffs, all the major companies, CNN included. We just talked about that. Look at all the layoffs. They're going to be more. Okay. So, and once again, this is all calculated. It is a way to keep prices from going too high too fast. That's called inflation. The Fed is making it very difficult for companies to continue the model of being able to access credit to make investment. And so when that money is not available, they have to deal with what they have to deal with. And like I was telling you about programs like Adult Swim, if you don't keep inviting people to the party, the party gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Same thing with a business. If you don't continue to innovate, if you don't continue to invest in your business, it will go out of business. And this money that is available from the Fed and through banks governed by the Fed, that's how these people are able to keep the innovation going. And so they're looking out ahead and they're saying, okay, so there are going to be more people out of work, going to be less money in the marketplace. So we have to cut down now, which adds to the problem. That's why you start getting into these cycles and you try to avoid them as much as you can. Remember, inflation during the Carter years in the late 70s hit 17%. Okay, so just understand that there's a lot to this. The polls January 2nd through 22nd field period included the 4-day 15-vote process in which Republicans, who now hold a slim majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, ultimately elected Kevin McCarthy to be the Speaker of the House. Revelations about classified documents from 2009 to 2017 found in President Joe Biden's private office and home also surfaced when the poll was in the field. Although mentions of the government as the nation's top problem rose 6 points, job approval ratings of Biden and Congress remained flat, as you might expect. By the way, the approval ratings of President Biden just barely over 40%, 41%. Congress, the congressional approval rating, 21%. Unbelievable. The government ranks as the top problem for both Republicans and Republican-leaning independents and Democrats and Democrat-leading independents. Inflation and immigration are each cited by 18% of Republicans, while mentions of inflation, 11%, and the economy in general and race relations, 9% each, trail the government among Democrats. Democrats are more likely than Republicans to view unifying the country and the environment as top problems. So the way this works, the Republican-leaning independents, 24% say government's the problem. 18% of Democrats say the same thing. Second, 18% of Republicans say inflation is the big problem. Democrats, 11%. Immigration, seen by Republicans as an 18% problem. 18% of Republicans see that as a problem. That's number 3. The Democrats see that as only a 5% issue. Economy in general, 11%. Democrats, 9%. So there's an awful lot of bipartisan agreement on just exactly what the problem is. However, the government, being the biggest problem in the United States, should tell the government to stop doing what they're doing and do something else. They have got to stop it. And yes, there are problems with government. This classified document mess is less about the documents and more about the mess. The Democrats should have never gone down that road. They should have never gone down that road, because this has touched everybody. I mean, we're going to get into that in the next hour. We're going to talk a little bit about the deep state rearing its ugly head again. And this is a problem for everyone. A government that plays politics, law enforcement, the Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, the intelligence agencies playing politics is how a nation falls into the abyss. And people, the vast majority of Americans, are seeing it. And they've seen it for a while. But these numbers are going up. And the government needs to take heed. And it's not like they haven't been warned, because they have. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stick around. We've got more of this broadcast next hour. Thanks for being here. Well, there you go. That's an hour. And we'll be back with hour 2 next. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. Thanks for joining us. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary, which is not news, just my opinion. I differentiate between news and opinion on this broadcast. As a matter of fact, when I do opinion, I even switch cameras so you can tell what's going on. By the way, in case you noticed, I bumped the camera just a second ago. I bumped the camera with my coat as I went outside to look at the snow. And by the way, there's nothing funnier than watching a Rottweiler who's never seen snow play in snow. There's nothing funnier. Anyway, that being said, I just had to fix the shot, so I pretty much did. I'll refine it in a minute. But we report the news, and we point out bias. In fact, I make opinion that's just my opinion. It's just as valuable as yours, so we debate. This is the Wells Report. Here, let's get to the news. The Justice Department told House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan today that it will not disclose information related to the special counsel investigation into President Biden's improper retention of classified documents because doing so could jeopardize the probe. This, by the way, from Fox News. Jordan launched his first formal investigation as chair of the House Judiciary Committee into Biden's mishandling of classified records and the DOJ's investigation of it. Jordan announced the panel's investigation after Attorney General Merrick Garland picked former U.S. Attorney Robert Hur as special counsel to investigate the matter, escalating it to a formal investigation from a review as more classified records were discovered at the president's Delaware home. In a letter to Garland, Merrick Garland, the AG, the Attorney General, Jordan and Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana, he's a Republican, demanded answers on the appointment of a special counsel and questioned the alleged concealment of information by the DOJ. Jordan is demanding all documents and communications regarding the appointment of Hur and between DOJ and the FBI related to the classified materials. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about that. The idea that these two representatives, including Representative Jim Jordan, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, would question the appointment of a special counsel, well, that's really none of their business. Okay, the special counsel was named by Merrick Garland. Now, here's an opinion. So, is it possible for us to sit there and say, okay, was Merrick Garland playing politics by appointing the special counsel so he could say, hey, we can't talk about it because the special counsel is investigating and, well, we just can't talk about it. Can you cast aspersions on that from a standpoint of credibility? You most certainly can. Why? Because the DOJ has played politics and Merrick Garland has been leading the parade on it. And so just because somebody says, okay, so we are going to stick to our rules about special counsels and not interfering, the idea that there is a political impulse behind it cannot be discounted, in my opinion. All right, back to the news. By the way, they also questioned the alleged concealment of information by the DOJ. Once again, the politicians are pointing out something that is political. The DOJ can be accused. You can have aspersions cast on the DOJ as playing politics with this issue. But I just explained why in the opinion of that. Jordan is demanding all documents and communications regarding the appointment of Hur and between the DOJ and FBI related to the classified materials. That is perfectly down the center line. He can demand it. The DOJ should indeed, and the FBI should indeed provide those documents. Because this idea, not necessarily publicly, but certainly in a closed session of the House Judiciary Committee, and oh, by the way, the Oversight Committee as well. Today, Assistant Attorney General Carlos Uriarte confirmed the DOJ's receipt of Jordan and Johnson's January 13th letter, but explained the reasoning for the agency's noncompliance. Uriarte noted that Jordan requested, quote, non-public information that is central to the ongoing special counsel investigation. Again, can that be seen as a dodge? Can that be seen as stonewalling? Yes. Is it Jim Jordan's fault, or is it the mainstream media's fault for that aspersion having some validity? The answer is no, because the DOJ keeps playing politics. They got to stop it. But it's going to be a while before anybody thinks anything besides politics being played on the part of the FBI and the DOJ. And it's going to be like a decade or more. Once you go through that door, you've gone through that door. It's not easy to unring a bell. And that's where the DOJ and the FBI find themselves right now, and they deserve it. They deserve it. They got to get rid of the politicians in their midst, and they got to get back to federal law enforcement in the case of the FBI. And the DOJ had, by God, better figure out a way to diffuse this dual-tiered legal system. And they better do it quickly. Because imagine this country if the people of the United States no longer trust the Department of Justice. Just let that hang for a moment. Like I said, that's how countries fall into the abyss. And frankly, we're as close to it right now as I want to get. We're a ways away, but still, we keep edging toward that mess. Stop it. This is just a policy decision on the part of the people that are playing games, political games, with our essential institutions of law enforcement. We can't continue this. Uriarte says the department's long-standing policy is to maintain confidentiality of such information regarding open matters. That may be, but these are not long-standing problems. This is not covered by a long-standing policy. The DOJ's mess is relatively recent. To quote long-standing policy is intellectually bankrupt. Again, just my opinion. This policy protects the American people's interests in the even-handed, dispassionate, and effective administration of justice. All I can say is this. Do you believe that the Department of Justice is engaged in even-handed, dispassionate, and effective administration of justice? Yes or no? Do you believe that's what the DOJ is doing? To answer my own question, no. No, they're not. And they need to get back to that. That's a great statement. Gosh, I wish it was true. I do. Yeah, and people on the chat room, no, exactly no. How could any thinking person think otherwise? Forget your political, forget the political ideology that you're following. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, a political DOJ is about to stomp you. It's just a matter of time. Uriarte said that disclosing non-public information in ongoing investigations could violate statutory requirements or court orders, none of which are currently in play now. Statutory requirements, perhaps. They could reveal roadmaps of our investigations. So, you're investigating the President of the United States. Open this up. You have a chance to show the people of the United States the transparency involved in all the brave words that we've heard. No one is above the law, not even the president. Then open it up. Let us see it. Stop protecting it. We know your sources and methods. When it comes to President Trump, you dress everybody in tactical gear and you show up at dawn and you break into the place. You throw the lawyers out. When you go to President Biden, and yes, he is a sitting president of the United States, he gets handled differently. It's a consensual search. Basically because what they want to do is handle things differently. In the case of Donald Trump, they were trying to destroy him politically. In the case of President Biden, they're trying to protect him politically. Again, I don't think that's an opinion. I think that's just honest reporting. He added that maintaining confidentiality safeguards the legal rights, personal safety, and private interests of individuals implicated by or who assisted in our investigations. That's valid. Okay, so out of the three statements, that one's the most valid. Uriarty said that while Congress has a legitimate interest in determining how the department enforces statutes, congressional inquiries during a presidency of a matter or the pendency of a matter pose an inherent threat to the integrity of the department's law enforcement and litigation functions. The bell's ringing. You rang it. You're trying to unring it. These are good words, not followed, not backed up by your actions. You need to follow this stuff up with true actions, transparent ones. Let us see. Let us see what you know, right up to the point where you start giving away classified information that's still classified. Remember, when we are talking about any president, any vice president, anybody with classified documents, these documents are old. We don't know whether they've been declassified or not. And while I understand the need to keep classified material classified, some of these documents are no longer classified. What are they? Release the information. And that goes for Trump, Biden, Pence, anybody. And by the way, while I'm at this, I also want to point out something else. Oh, the last few days, President Obama was asked about this. I reported it on the broadcast. He said, nope, we don't have anything. We are fine. We did everything exactly right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The National Archives and Records Administration asked if we could go through some of those papers, and the president refused. President Obama refused. Why? Well, we don't know. But I guarantee that he has classified documents in his possession. And I guarantee that President Bush does. I guarantee that even President Clinton, who went through this himself, still has some. And some of it's none of our damn business. Okay, but some of it is. The problem with it is that when you kick over this anthill to try to get rid of somebody you don't want in the presidency, you kick ants all over everybody. DOJ looks stupid. The FBI looks stupid. President Trump looks stupid. President Biden looks stupid. Vice President Pence looks stupid. And the only reason that President Obama doesn't look stupid or President Bush doesn't look stupid is because they haven't been caught yet. Now, does that mean we need to immediately form a committee to go and see if we can catch them? No. Leave them alone. They've got security clearances. Let them use them. This is political malpractice. And there's nothing else to it. There's no other way of saying anything else. And we're all just writhing in this stupidity. Okay? How about this? How about we knock it the heck off? All right? Look, I want to get to the bottom of some of this, but we're not going to get to the bottom of some of this by stonewalling and saying, well, we can't compromise a special counsel investigation. Baloney. Jeez. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We are talking a little bit about the very latest when it comes to presidential documents, Joe Biden, etc. This is from Fox News. It is a biased report. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, the Republican from Kentucky, said the investigation into President Biden's alleged mishandling of classified information is of the utmost importance after it was revealed the FBI discovered notebooks in his Delaware home that may contain classified information. Comer joined Fox News today to discuss the discovery and the significance of the probe moving forward. So, it was revealed that there are notebooks with classified materials inside them. Who revealed it? Who revealed it? By the way, it is an example of the transparency that I'm asking for the DOJ to embrace as opposed to stiff arm away. The fact that we know that there are now notebooks with classified materials in them, handwritten from what we understand, that's good. That's good. There's nothing wrong with it. But who released it? Is this from a DOJ source? Is this from an FBI source? If that's the case, then the statements made by Merrick Garland and Mr. Uriarte, who we just quoted, then those don't ring true. Suddenly they ring hollow. In other words, no, we can't comment or discuss anything having to do with any of the materials, but somebody released the fact that some of this material was in a notebook. Come on, guys. Come on, we're not stupid. You do not live life in a 3-network news environment. You live life in government has got to move at the speed of the internet because all of us have access to all of this. And it's time for all of it to be at least as transparent as what we can find on the internet. It's like for some reason, the United States government is trapped in this anachronistic idea that, well, we just don't have to talk about it. No, you really do. And all these people that are angry about conspiracy theorists coming up with the most ridiculous theories. Why do you suppose they do that? Because nature abhors a vacuum. You can't put garbage out into a vacuum because people say, oh, wow, look at the garbage. You have to put truth out there. Stop screwing around. This is our government. We're paying your salaries. Work for us, not work for your political endeavor. Knock it off. Get back to work. So James Comer says this. And once again, biased report here. Nothing that Joe Biden's done with respect to mishandling these classified documents is normal. Take into consideration he's also being investigated for influence peddling with our adversaries around the world. It's even more concerning. Sir, that's a conflation of two completely different issues. He goes on. Look, more information comes out every day where his son, especially as well as his two brothers, have shady business dealings with our adversaries around the world. That's a brave statement for somebody with no proof, sir. And part of that, by the way, that proof would come out in a court circumstance, that there are no indictments, no grand jury stuff as far as we know, is another stinging indictment on the lack of transparency in all of this. And so when we learned that Joe Biden had classified documents from all over the place, and Hunter Biden especially lived in his house, when he had those classified documents, we became extra concerned. That's why this investigation is of the utmost importance for the United States Congress as well as the American people. Okay, I get it. That's true. I get that. That's fine. But it's political. Political things are biased. That's all there is. Okay? By the way, so far it looks the only classified papers taken from Trump were his personal tax returns. Amazingly, they prove that he is one of the only people in government service to actually lose money while he was in office. True. Which means, Mr. President, President Trump, why didn't you release him earlier? Come on, man. Jeez Louise. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. The chat room is flying. Please, by all means, join us. At the beginning of every hour, I say the same thing, north to south, coast to coast, and around the world. That's not a statement of ego or aggrandizement. It's what we do. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, he, by the way, this being reported by The Hill, is warning against a race to arm Ukraine with high-powered weapons as Ukraine ramps up its calls for fighter jets and long-range missiles. This was something we talked about last week. We talked about this last week, and we were talking about the fact that sending tanks to Ukraine on the part of Germany and the United States is a provocative act and represents a huge escalation. And we also pointed out, I did this not just on this broadcast, but also on Twitter. Where does it stop? I was responding to former Secretary of State, former CIA Director Mike Pompeo. And I said, where does it stop? The scenario is, okay, now what we've done is we've put high value tanks out on the battlefield in Ukraine. It's going to be a while before they show up. Well, the Russians have those too. They're called Armata tanks, and they're state of the art, as well as the M1 Abrams and the Leopard 2. This is a serious problem. And yes, the Ukrainians are asking Germany for the MiG-29s that are sitting around in the former East German airfields, essentially collecting dust. How do you get rid of tanks? Well, there's a former Soviet and current Russian Air Force system that is designed to get rid of tanks. They're called MiG-23s. And if you don't think that if these tanks actually make a difference on the battlefield, that those MiG-23s aren't going to be flying into Ukrainian airspace, you're dreaming. So that's the response. By the way, Vladimir Putin just announced another call-up of troops numbering 200,000, which by my shaky math equals somewhere around 500,000 troops dedicated to this war. Sooner or later, it's going to be an actual war, as opposed to essentially, I know it's hard to describe, Russian rocket attacks as a slap fight. But when you consider what the Russians can focus on Ukraine anytime they wish, we're baiting a bulldog here. And Olaf Scholz has it. He's got it. Let's continue. For some reason, Scholz engineered the breakthrough with President Biden to send those modern tanks to Ukraine earlier this month, but now says, those MiG-29s, the fighters that were left after the Soviet bloc collapsed, and they just left everything where it was, is a non-starter. Quote, I can only advise against entering into a constant competition to outbid each other when it comes to weapon systems, says Scholz in an interview with the German news outlet Tagesspiegel. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued pleas over the weekend for long-range missiles and fighter jets as he seeks to strengthen the country's air defense. Long-range missiles are not air defense. Patriot missiles are air defense. And they better have them, because those MiG-23s are going to be flying very soon. Germany insisted the country will not be equipping Ukraine with warplanes. The question of combat aircraft does not arise at all, said Scholz, according to Politico. Moscow painted the provision of tanks as, quote, direct involvement in the war, unquote, despite President Biden's insistence that the move is, quote, not an offensive threat to Russia. One of the things that you learn very, very quickly, and President Biden, and I pointed this out last week, President Biden seemingly doesn't get this information or doesn't understand it. The enemy gets a vote. The Russians get a vote on how they respond to what is absolutely a provocative attack. These tanks, that is a provocative act. They are going to respond. And you saying, well, they're not going to respond because it's No, what is it? Not an offensive threat. Okay. What do they think? I don't think the president has an answer for that question. That's how wars start. Good heavens to Betsy. By the way, the United States has not shared any plans to send warplanes. First of all, you're not going to send warplanes to Ukraine because the Ukrainian pilots that are sitting around saying, we better do something about this, we better do something about this, we better do something about this, are all MiG-29 pilots. The only MiG-29s that are available to the Ukrainians are the ones sitting in Germany. I mean, so no, the president is not going to send warplanes to Ukraine because that would be the only reason you do that is because you're ready to go to war with Russia. NBC News reported that President Biden got angry with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on a call last fall when he responded to the latest U.S. announcement of billions in aid by piling on additional requests. President Biden reportedly told Zelensky he should be more grateful for U.S. support. Well, yeah. The U.S. plans to send 31 Abrams tanks into Ukraine. Germany, the maker of the Leopard 2 battle tank, said that it would send 14 machines, 14 tanks, and approve of other countries' requests to do the same. The speed of supply has been and will be one of the key factors in the war, said Zelensky. Significant defense results from the United States and other NATO members are also key factors. Russia hopes to drag out the war to exhaust our forces, so we have to make time our weapon. We must speed up the events, speed up the supply, and the opening of new necessary weaponry options for Ukraine. I understand that. I do. But once again, the hanging question in all of this, and I haven't heard a good answer yet, is just exactly why is it that Russia and Ukraine are engaged in this conflict in the first place? Why is that? What are they fighting over? What are they fighting over that could not have been taken care of at a negotiation table? I can read a map. I know exactly what Russia wants. They want to be able to protect their interests in the Crimean Peninsula. They have 2 naval bases there. They are critical to Russia. You know, many of their ports are not warm weather. They're cold. That's why they have icebreakers. They can't move there. They can't sortie their navy out of the northern ports during the winter. They can't do it. That leaves their Pacific fleet. Well, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean is a world away there. And by the way, if the Russians start sorting those ships out of the Pacific fleet, what do they have for the Pacific fleet? Has anybody noticed that China is rattling sabers? And as well, I still can't figure out why they haven't invaded Taiwan yet. There's a story that I'm going to get to here in a minute about a United States Air Force general saying, I think we're going to be fighting by 2025. More about that coming up in just a couple of moments. Chris Grimes says, why are they fighting? Because Putin lives in the past and wants to reestablish the old Soviet Union dominance over Eastern Europe. Well, okay. But once again, Putin forgot that the people of Eastern Europe have a vote. They're not going back to the Soviet Union. There's something else going on. Now, you are reporting correctly, Chris, that that's the story we've been told. But I have Russian friends. I have Ukrainian friends. They tell a completely different story. The only reason I don't report that story on this broadcast, I can't confirm any of it. I'm trying. But there's more to this than what we know. We're being told particles of the story. And yes, it is incredibly disturbing that we, the people of the United States, engaged in sending billions to Ukraine, and, oh, by the way, now offensive weapons. We don't know what they're fighting for. All I can tell you is my Russian friends start the conversations with me by laughing at what Americans think is going on there. Once again, I can't confirm it. I can't report it. But we'll see. We'll see when some of this news breaks, if it ever does. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So now we're in this situation where, okay, the Russians are going to respond. It is not going to be good. And once again, Chris points out, hey, Putin is committing genocide against the Ukrainian people. Hundreds of war crimes being documented. He's essentially farmed out the killing and destruction to the Wagner Group, which is a paramilitary organization that is comprised of thugs. He's correct. But once again, that's the story we hear. And while war crimes can include genocide, I'm not exactly sure that that's what's going on here. And the reason I'm saying that is, for all intents and purposes, Ukrainians are Russians and Russians are Ukrainians. So if it's genocide, it's also suicide. What are they doing? Once again, this points to the fact that we don't know everything. We still don't know everything about what's going on there. Yes, Putin's a bad guy. Okay, I get it. But once again, there are pieces in this story that are missing. There's also another small little rubric that we have to keep in mind. China, at some point, is going to act against Taiwan. This Air Force general that I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes, you know, he's probably saying the quiet part out loud. That was probably not the right thing to do, but is there a better time? Is there a better time to attack Taiwan than where we are now? Billions of dollars, military assets, ammunition going to Ukraine. And last week it was reported that Taiwan was missing out on some of the U.S. promises to their military because of Ukraine. So is there a better time? No. Weak leadership in the United States. The Taiwan Chinese issue is half a world away. The United States drew down its forces to the point where we used to have a doctrine in the United States military that talked about the fact that we should be able to engage in two worldwide conflicts at the same time. We're about to have two worldwide conflicts. Do we still have the ability to do it? Not right now. Not right now. And it's not just us. It was announced today, reported today, that the United Kingdom, the UK, is dangerously close to not being combat effective because of all of the drawdowns that they've been enduring. This is making the worldwide situation hot, or at least hotter. Yeah, even blind men can see this. Yeah, I don't know what these guys are doing. All I know is that wars are great excuses to suspend civil liberties. And that seems to be where we are from a political standpoint. If you want to look at a political motivation of what's going on, I really can't see a better one. This is an error. And one last thing. Democrats patted themselves on the back for getting Joe Biden elected. They walked around with their chests puffed out saying we could get anybody elected. Well, congratulations. Well done. You got the least qualified president in the history of the United States sitting there. I'm pretty sure that when they did all that in 2018, 2019, and in 2020, they really weren't expecting that this was going to blow up in their faces to the tune of a worldwide conflict or two. But guess what? It's happening right before our eyes. In 1960, Nikita Khrushchev met the brand new president, John Kennedy, took the news back to the Soviet Union that the new president was weak. What did we get out of that? We got the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what we got out of that. That is still the closest to nuclear war we ever got in the history of nuclear weapons and the Cold War. You have to do the right thing. We, the people at the top of the Constitution, is not we, the politicians, or we, the politicos, or we, the kingmakers, or we this, we that. It's we, the people. You better start listening to us. This is the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells from the chat room. The sanctions are adversely affecting the Russian economy, says Chris. Oil revenues to Russia also took a precipitous drop over the last months due to an unexpectedly warmer winter in Europe. True, but those sanctions are paper thin. And it takes a long, long time to hurt even an economy as small as Russia's. It takes a while. And those sanctions, remember, they have a double-edged effect. So you take a government, and the government, say for example, decides to do something stupid. So the United States issues sanctions. A government that would do something stupid will now look at those sanctions and see the suffering that their country endures Does that push them farther away from the conflict or closer to it? When you're talking about stiff-necked thistleheads, and I assure you that is exactly what President Putin is, that is going to motivate them to move forward. It's sort of like what the Democrats do when they get caught doing something stupid. They double down on it. Well, that's not a uniquely American thing. Well, that's what we're pushing Putin into. That's what we're pushing him into. Same thing with Iranians. They found a way around those sanctions. And they were able to get themselves out of the Iran nuclear deal so they can continue pursuing a nuclear weapon, which will be the end of their country. And so you got to look at this several different ways. Once again, the enemy gets a vote. It's not going to be sanctions that gets Russia out of Ukraine. It's going to be a drastic military loss. And I don't care what you're talking about. It's one thing when you've got a particle of a Russian military in a small country in Central Asia, and that's Afghanistan. It's one thing, okay, to get rid of those guys. This is in Europe. The Russians had been working on battle plans to go into Western Europe for decades. All they're doing is taking those same plans and turning them east instead of west. They have all the resources necessary to be able to obliterate Ukraine at will. Okay? They do. Let's see what else. From what I understand, it's going to be a year before the Ukraine actually gets those tanks. Well, the M1 Abrams tanks don't have to come from the United States. There are a whole bunch of them, likewise, sitting around after the Cold War was over, gathering dust in Europe. Moving them to Ukraine is not a year-long effort. Maybe months. And that's what we have out in the open. I'm sure those tanks are already moving. I'm sure that maybe even some of them are already in country. So just remember, you don't have to move them from the United States. You can move them from right around the corner. They're there. Let me get back to something that happened 3 days ago. A 4-star Air Force general sent a memo to his officers and predicted the U.S. will be at war with China in 2 years and told them to get ready to prep by firing a clip at a target and aim for the head. That's in the memo. It was sent Friday, obtained by NBC News. General Mike Minahan, the head of Air Mobility Command, says, "I hope I'm wrong. My gut tells me we'll be fighting in 2025. Air Mobility Command has 50,000 service members, nearly 500 airplanes responsible for transport and refueling. This is something the Chinese do not have. They do not have fleets and fleets and fleets of C-5 Galaxy class aircraft that can move material quickly. They don't. On the other hand, they don't have to move very far. They also don't have the Navy it takes to be able to cross the Taiwan Straits with a whole lot of soldiers without being seen. I doubt very sincerely that there won't be a whole lot of Chinese transports that find the bottom of the Taiwan Straits if China tries to do it. But that doesn't do anything about their Air Force. And so, once again, there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. Minahan said in the memo that because both Taiwan and the U.S. will have presidential elections in 2024, the U.S. will be distracted, and Chinese President Xi Jinping will have an opportunity to move on Taiwan. That's something else that we talk about a lot here. Every 4 years, right before a presidential election cycle, the United States loses its flipping mind. I'm not the only one that noticed that. Chinese notes it. They note it. That's a perfect time to invade Taiwan, because the first thing that's going to happen during an election season is there's going to be a debate about what to do. And one party is going to yell at the other party about how stupid they are and their plans, and the other party is going to, and so on and so forth. All the while, China is going to be attacking Taiwan. This is not tough. This is just not tough. The general lays out goals for preparing, including a fortified, ready, integrated, and agile joint force maneuver team ready to fight and win inside that first island chain. The signed memo is addressed to all Air Wing commanders and Air Mobility Command and other Air Force operational commanders and orders them to report all major efforts to prepare for the China conflict to the general by February 28th. During the month of February, he's directing all Air Mobility Command personnel to fire a clip into a 7-meter target with the full understanding the unrepentant lethality matters most. Aim for the head. But that, by the way, is a magazine, not a clip. In March, he directs all AMC personnel to conduct their personal affairs, whether a visit should be scheduled with their servicing base legal officer to ensure that they are legally ready and prepared. The winds of war. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. All right. I'll be back with more in a moment. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. You have to. We point out both. We make commentary, which is not news. It's simply my opinion. I say so. And that opinion is debatable, and so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate Monday through Friday, usually between 2 and 5 p.m. live. You find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. Why didn't I say YouTube? Well, because we're suspended right now, because I played a piece of the Project Veritas Pfizer quote-unquote hidden camera interview. And I pointed out today to YouTube that, excuse me, I was reporting a news story. I was not endorsing the Project Veritas report. I was reporting the fact that Project Veritas did a hidden camera interview, and I was very nervous about it because it's hidden camera interview and there are ethical problems. And yes, as Chris Grimes pointed out earlier today, there are indeed problems with Project Veritas and the overuse of their hidden camera interview techniques. And yeah, they made mistakes. And that's what I pointed out both before and after that report. I appealed today. We'll see if YouTube changes their mind. Cross your fingers. This being reported from USA Today, Republican Asa Hutchinson says he has not made a decision yet about running for president in 2024, but the former Arkansas governor said in an interview he plans to decide in the next several months. Hutchinson told USA Today he has continued to seriously consider a presidential bid as he visits the early voting states of Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. I'll make a decision down the road. Obviously, it will have to be in the first half of this year, but stay tuned. Hutchinson, who left office earlier this month, if he decides to run, he could find himself in a crowded GOP field. As many as a dozen other Republicans have toured the early contest states. Former President Donald Trump is the only candidate in either political party who has formally announced a 2024 White House bid. Hutchinson is 72. There's a consensus that I will be alternatives to Donald Trump. I should be in each of those conversations. I agree. It is important to have a governor that knows how to exercise executive leadership, someone who's got a record at both the national and state level of solving problems. So it takes a little bit of time to get that message out and to develop the support that's needed for that kind of endeavor, he said. He is a professional politician. He knows what he's doing. Hutchinson has also served as a member of the U.S. House and administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration under President George W. Bush. There are other people that are taking an opportunity to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm in this too. This from the Hill. In a recent appearance on Fox, Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, listened while host Sean Hannity listed some of the potential Republican candidates she might have to run against if she decides to seek the White House in 2024. He named President Donald Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, former Secretary of State, former CIA Director Mike Pompeo, Senator Ted Cruz. Haley paused and then said with a smile, most of them are my friends. Let the best woman win. She's witty. I like her. She's really good. It was a clever line, according to The Hill. But it does indicate a calculated strategy that will subtly build the case that male Republican leaders have failed the party. That's low-hanging fruit. I'll explain why in a moment. And the nation in recent election cycles have also been failed by those same Republican men. To that question during the same interview, Haley reminded Hannity that his substantial audience, that, quote, Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. Okay. There is no doubt that Haley realizes major changes are taking place within the Republicans' conservative and traditional faith voter base. Namely, it's become much more open to having women and people of color on a presidential ticket. Well, that's because the traditional voter base of the Republican Party, they don't care about gender and race. They're interested in competence. She may be more than willing to creatively remind the voter base of past failures of white males who have led our country. Divisiveness is not how you win a presidential campaign. For sure, Haley is making the case it's time for a generational change with regard to the next ticket. With a broadside many could assume was directed at both President Biden and President Trump, she declared, quote, "When you're looking at the future of America, I think it's time for a new generational change. I don't think you need to be 80 years old to be a leader in Washington, D.C." In the past, some have speculated that Haley might make an outstanding running mate for an eventual Republican nominee. I recently spoke with a Republican who knows Haley very well. She says she's having none of that. Nikki Haley decided her time is now, and she's about to take the gloves off when it comes to President Trump, DeSantis, and Pompeo. By the way, we're talking about Douglas McKinnon, who is an opinion contributor to The Hill. So that's the I in that sentence. It's not me. The only thing that I can tell you on this particular case is that she has certainly named the top runners: President Trump, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pompeo. And I can put her name in that particular group of people as well. She's a serious candidate. She has real credentials. I'm very interested in hearing what she has to say. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo may be the recipient of the prolonged pushback from Haley, since it was Pompeo who decided to launch a preemptive strike against the former South Carolina governor. Well, that's probably one of the first political battles of 2022 between those two. In the seemingly compulsory memoir that's needed to prep for a presidential run, Pompeo went after Haley by claiming in his just published book, Never Give an Inch, that Haley tried to replace Mike Pence as vice president under Trump. Haley immediately clapped back at Pompeo, quote, "It's really sad when you're having to go out there and put lies and gossip forward to sell a book," unquote. And then the words "game on" in this opinion piece. With an attack on Haley, whom he most assuredly sees as a rival for the GOP nomination, Pompeo might have just fallen into her trap. And I have to sneeze. Have I mentioned lately how much I hate mountain cedar? It grows here in Texas, and it's killing me. Where were we? Okay. With his attack against Haley, Mike Pompeo is falling into a trap, per se. It's a trap that, among other things, can make a strong case of not only failures of the Republican old boy network, but also that the network that network for years, even decades, has worked to keep women and people of color out of circles of power in Washington. Okay. All right. Let me get to some of this. All right. First of all, being divisive is not going to work. In order to be the president of the United States, you have to unite the people around you. Moderates, independents, other people from around the United States, even Democrats, have to see you as someone they would vote for. To pluck that low-hanging fruit, to say, my gosh, white Republican men have lost 7 out of the 8 presidential popular votes. That is beneath the intellectual acumen of Nikki Haley. That was probably a talking point that was floated out there by one of those famous election experts. That's not how you do it. The simple case of the matter is this: the reason that white males have been in leadership in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, take a look who the president of the United States is just a simple fact of demographics. 63% of the people of the United States are white. And yes, women are making dramatic inroads into the power circles of Washington, D.C. in both parties, and they should. I have no problem with that. Neither does anybody else who's actually looking for somebody that knows what they're doing. The simple case of her saying that it's all the men's fault, once again, is divisive. Stop it. Talk about the issues. Forget the packaging. Just as most voters that I've seen in the United States don't care about race, don't care about genders, the next leader, this generational leader that you're talking about, Ms. Haley, ambassador, has got to be somebody that equally doesn't care about any of those things either. Just be better. Just be better. I don't care what the politics are. The American people are the only ones that know who the president is or who the president will be. They're the only ones. And what you have to understand is that you've got to reach out to those people and you've got to talk to them face to face. And you've got to have something that's beyond, well, it's all the man's fault. Baloney. Baloney. What we need to do is we need to actually pick an American president who understands that the only value that the American government has is to serve Americans, not to serve Democrats, not to serve Republicans, not to serve the political endeavor, but to serve the endeavor of the people of the United States. All we've done, all I've seen these presidents do, with the possible exception of President Trump, is service politics and political endeavors. All they want from the people of the United States is to shut up and pay for everything. Well, that's coming to an end, thankfully. And I swear, if Nikki Haley can figure that out before anybody else does, she might be the next president of the United States. But so far, what she's saying isn't that. She's playing the division game. You can't. You can't win with division. You can only win with multiplication. How do you multiply your vote total? By giving the voters what they're asking for. Solutions to problems instead of exploitation of problems. Solve them. Stop playing around with all this garbage and get to work. Not for the political endeavor. For the people of the United States. Donald Trump said America first. Donald Trump said America first. Yeah. And went a long way to do that. Good. We need more of that, not less. America First has overtones that take us back to the Second World War, and that was isolationism. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about serving the American people. And we just don't have that. And we better find it. And Washington's not going to find it. Only the people of the United States can make that change happen. And we had better do it. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells, taking a look at the chat room that we've been referring to for all these broadcasts. Yvonne says, how much military equipment we could have supplied to Ukraine if we just moved them from Afghanistan or from Pakistan or from Afghanistan? Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, there were around a dozen M1 Abrams tanks sent to Afghanistan in 2010. I'm pretty sure we got those things out of there before we left everything else. We left a bunch of MRAPs, which are mine-resistant vehicles. And by the way, those things are top-heavy and dangerous to the crews just driving the things around. Anyway, that being said, I'm not real worried that we left MRAPs. Goodness gracious, those are awful vehicles. Chris points out that all of this could have been avoided years ago had Ukraine been accepted into NATO. Yeah, that was a non-starter. Russia would not tolerate that then, nor will they tolerate it now. Think about again going back to Cuba. When the Soviet Union moved nuclear weapons into Cuba, the United States did not tolerate it. Well, that's basically the same thing having to do with what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine is not going to be a NATO nation unless Russia decides that it's more important to build their country. Like, for example, I don't know, why doesn't Putin concentrate on an interstate highway system for Russia so that people can drive around their country? Once again, these are all issues. Let's see. Let's talk about. Oh, this is a good question. Randy says, do you actually respect Biden because he holds the office of president? Okay. Respecting President Biden as Joe Biden, my respect has limits. Respecting President Biden as a guy who has served his home state for nearly half a century, I'm not willing to argue with the voters of Delaware for sending him back to the United States Senate over and over and over again, but I do respect the voters of Delaware. So Senator Joe Biden has my respect because of the voters of Delaware, not necessarily because of his achievements in the United States Senate. As the President of the United States, I respect Joe Biden as the President of the United States because the people sent him there. That being said, do I respect the office of the presidency more than I respect the current occupier of it? Yes. But does that extend to President Biden? Yes. Yes, it does. And so if you hear me being respectful, it's because he is President Joe Biden. Do I agree? No. But I also am not willing to pick a fight with the people that keep sending him to office. Okay? So Biden is helping Russia. Yeah. And he's also helping China. And why he's doing it, I don't have any idea. But when the history is written about what happens in the next 5 years, it's not going to be kind. It is not going to be kind to Joe Biden. Randy, our military is the biggest in the world. We spend more per year for our military than the next 10 countries combined. In point of fact, our military is not the biggest in the world. The Chinese military is far larger, and the Russian military also was larger than the United States. We are simply better. Do we spend more on our military than the next 10 countries combined? That's a tricky statement insofar as a lot of the militaries around the world are also supplied by the United States and by United States military equipment. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. I'm doing a little bit of work on the chat room. Randy. Last week. Okay. How do I start this? All right. In 1947, a group of researchers called the Chicago Atomic Scientists, these were the guys who participated in the Manhattan Project, came up with something called the Doomsday Clock. After the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they began publishing a newsletter called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which, since its inception, has depicted the clock on every cover. The Doomsday Clock. The clock was first represented in 1947 when the Bulletin co-founder Hyman Goldsmith asked artist Myrtle Langsdorff, wife of the Manhattan Project research associate and Silazard petition signatory Alexander Langsdorff, to design a cover for the magazine's June 1947 issue. As it was explained, the Bulletin's clock is not a gauge to register the ups and downs of the international power struggle. It is intended to reflect basic changes in the level of continuous danger in which mankind lives in the nuclear age. This is also an attempt by the scientists who gave us the nuclear capability to destroy ourselves as a way to soothe their consciences. You see, when you create a device that on the brink of the test, they are trying to figure out whether or not this particular device is going to incinerate the entire Earth, because the blast is essentially a smaller version of the sun on the surface of the Earth. They thought there was a possibility that it might take the chain reaction that powered the explosion and include the atmosphere. And there was a lively debate and a lot of very serious conversations about whether or not they were about to destroy the world by touching off the Trinity device. And after they had these very serious, pulse-pounding, bullet-sweat conversations, they went ahead and touched it off anyway. The foolhardiness of that has really only been equaled by those same flipping maniacs working on trying to make viruses that will cause a certain patch of itchy skin and very intimate parts of your body into something that will eat you entirely through something called gain of function. Arguably, it's a crime against humanity. And so they came up with this doomsday clock to try to warn people of the horrifying possibilities of nuclear exchange, which they gave us in the first place. And they say to themselves, well, if we hadn't developed it, then Nazi Germany would have developed it. Okay, that's plausible. And certainly, if they had developed it, they would have used it. Oh, yeah. However, my assertion that these guys were trying to bandage their wounded consciences, I think that stands. So the doomsday clock, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, yeah, it's been flittering around Armageddon for decades now. Yeah. The clock's original setting in 1947 was 7 minutes to midnight. It has since been set backwards 8 times and forward 17 times for a total of 25 times. The furthest time from midnight was 17 minutes after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The nearest has been 90 seconds, which was set 6 days ago. The clock was moved to 2.5 minutes in 2017, forward 2 minutes to midnight in January of 2018, left unchanged in 2019. In January of 2020, it was moved forward to 100 seconds, 1 minute, 40 seconds before midnight. The clock setting was left unchanged in 2021 and 2022. In January 2023, it was moved forward to 90 seconds, 1 minute and 30 seconds before midnight, midnight being global Armageddon. Since 2010, the clock has been moved forward 4 minutes and 30 seconds. This has changed by 5 minutes and 30 seconds since 1947. In other words, I'm just going to say it the way it hit my mind, these idiots have been talking about us being on the brink of annihilation since 1947. I wasn't going to talk about it because there are other things that are more important. But it came out in USA Today again. Today. Nuclear nightmare ticks closer. Why any use of nuclear weapons would be a disaster. This is from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. And they've been hammering us since 1947 with this. And all I can say is, when it comes to their saying any use of nuclear weapons would be a disaster, I say, no. Hey, morons. Why don't you say something? Why don't just be Captain Obvious? No kidding. Use of nuclear weapons would be disaster. Well, no kidding. Jesus. The only reason we survived the first use of nuclear weapons is because nobody else had them. This article continues. The threat of a civilization-ending nuclear war increased this year as Russia repeatedly invoked its mighty nuclear arsenal to deter Western nations from intervening during its invasion of Ukraine. We sure showed them, didn't we? We're sending them tanks now. That threat was reflected Tuesday in the setting of the doomsday clock, which ticked forward 90 seconds to midnight. The closest it has ever been to signaling an imminent human-created catastrophe. Quote, every time there's been a setback in the war, President Vladimir Putin has doubled down. I wish we could discount entirely the possibility he could resort to nuclear weapons, but I don't think we can, says Steve Fetter, a professor of public policy at the University of Maryland and a specialist in international security and nuclear issues. The nuclear risks are not limited to Russia and its war against Ukraine, said Fetter. China is building hundreds of nuclear silos. Yeah, except they don't have weapons to put in them yet. There's a failure to contain North Korean and Iranian nuclear programs. India and Pakistan have increased their nuclear arsenals. True. Because they want to destroy each other. The movement of the clock to just 90 seconds to midnight sends a message that the situation is urgent, with possible broad consequences and long-standing effects. No kidding. This according to Rachel Bronson, who is the current president of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. You know, I've described this as the firecracker pigeon scenario. You know, you go to a park, and there are people there with bags of food, And they're tossing out food to pigeons, and they're sitting there munching away and having a great time. And they make cute little cooing sounds. And the people feeding the pigeons are just making themselves happy with the sound and watching the little birds eat. And the people that hate pigeons are saying, "My God, why are you feeding the rats of the avian world?" And I'm sitting there saying, they carry disease. And I said, every wild bird carries diseases. Have you ever heard of bird flu? Hello. Anyway, so somebody that hates pigeons goes and sits down, and instead of the bag being filled with food, it's filled with firecrackers. The birds see somebody filled with a bag, and they sort of gather around. And the guy reaches in, grabs a firecracker, lights it, and throws it in the flock of pigeons. And the pigeons go crazy, and they fly around. Ah! But you know what? If you keep throwing firecrackers into flocks of pigeons, sooner or later, they don't lose their minds. But their little hearts go faster than they used to, and their little blood pressures are higher than they used to be. And because they're anxious that the guy with the food is not the guy with the firecracker, and vice versa. The doomsday clock is the bag of firecrackers. And the idea that the same people who gave us the weapons required for them to scare the living snot out of us every bit, okay, every few months or weeks, is tiresome. The doomsday clock is stupid. And when you consider that the brightest minds, arguably the brightest minds in the world, came up with something so stupid to scare the living snoticuses out of us, I think doesn't really require explanation. But I was amazed last Friday when people are talking about the doomsday clock. The doomsday clock. Now, Randy says, well, we should stop feeding them. What? The pigeons or the people that keep taking firecrackers out to scare the pigeons? You probably think we should stop feeding pigeons. Okay. I think we should stop feeding the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Listen, people, these scientists, you're the reason that we have the nuclear anxiety attack. Why don't you stop picking at the scab of the magnificent scientific achievement that you inflicted on human beings? Of course, this ties to my Armageddon scenarios of artificial intelligence, whereby at some point human beings are going to be an afterthought on this planet. We are going to create the technology that essentially changes everything. And people who say, we gotta quit feeding them damn pigeons. What are we going to do when human beings are the pigeons? And all of these brilliant scientists who keep trying to find ways to make human beings irrelevant are finally actually successful. We're going to want the higher being of synthetic artificial intelligence to show up with bags of food, because they're going to be the ones feeding us. Don't you think? Since they are arguably helping us out now to the point where I'm sitting here right this minute, surrounded by 3 functioning computers and another 4 or 5 non-functioning computers. People laugh at me when they say, why are you being so polite to Siri? Well, for the same reason I'm polite to my kids. They may be picking out my nursing home. Yvonne, always practical, says, by the way, pigeons are an excellent food source. Yeah. Yeah, as soon as these morons are successful in getting rid of cows, the same people that are trying to get us to eat insects, yeah, we might be dining on squab. The doomsday clock. I think they're one vowel sound away from reality. It should be the doomsday clock. Because it certainly would be dumb to use nuclear weapons. And talking about using nuclear weapons as a disaster is dumb. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Randy points out, sooner or later we might be stopping by Kentucky Fried Pigeon. I bet you those 11 herb spices probably would be just as tasty on a pigeon as it is a chicken. I've been trying to avoid this story longer than I should have. I've reported it. But there is a development in the Tyree Nichols murder. A sixth Memphis police officer has been placed on leave in connection with the death of Tyree Nichols, the 29-year-old driver who died after a traffic stop. Officer Preston Hemphill was placed on leave, according to a spokesperson for the Memphis Police Department. The spokesperson confirmed that Hemphill, who was hired by the Memphis Police Department in 2018, has been on leave since the beginning of the investigation. In its initial narrative, the Memphis Police Department said officers involved had been relieved of duty, but did not say how many officers there were. The police department again declined to give a total number of officers when confirming Hemphill's leave today. Memphis police declined to specify the reason for Hemphill being placed on leave. He has not been charged with a crime. Hemphill being placed on leave comes after the city released graphic footage of the 5 officers beating Tyree Nichols to death. Hemphill's defense attorney, Lee Gerald, said his client was the 3rd officer at the initial stop of Nichols. Video 1 is his body cam footage. He was never present at the second scene. He is cooperating with officials in this investigation. In the body camera footage that was taken from Hemphill's point of view, according to Gerald, officers can be heard yelling at Nichols to get out of his car before they're seen forcibly removing him from that car. Officers hold Nichols down, and I'm not going to continue that. The camera shakes as Nichols runs, and an officer whom Gerald identified as Hemphill shoots at him with a taser. After a brief chase, Hemphill, who is white, stops running after Nichols, turns back, and can be heard saying, quote, "I hope they stomp his ass," unquote. Demonstrators outside of Memphis Police Department precinct demanded the officer who's seen firing what appears to be a taser in the video be identified and charged. Well, all I can say is, for those people who were trying to explain why it was that 5 black police officers beat another black man to death, I'm sure you're feeling a lot better. Thankfully, there's a white officer involved at some level. The unfortunate statement was that I hope they stomp his ass. That would be actionable. Did he take part in the beating that ended Tyree Nichols' life? No. He made a statement. What I suggest is, let's watch just how far that statement gets escalated. Now, I don't care about the race of the officers involved in this killing. I have pointed out that this killing bears way too many coincidences to the George Floyd killing. Both are crimes against humanity. Do I see a difference between Officer Hemphill walking away and the other officers participating in the murder? Yes. Do I believe that there should be equal outcomes for all these officers? No, I don't. Should that statement cost Hemphill at some level? Yes. Do I give a dang about the race of anybody involved in the death of Tyree Nichols? No. I hope that everyone's punishment involved in that is just, including Officer Hemphill. But remember, the guys who killed George Floyd were white. And I can see no difference in those two deaths. This whole thing is ridiculous. That there are police officers out there that would turn a traffic stop into murder. I don't have to say anything else. Race drops out of it. Only the horror remains. I'm proud of myself. I got through that story without crying. Almost. This is the Wells Report. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay.